Howdy YouTube, my name's Ty and welcome to this video. This is the second of a two-part video installment talking about Millennium Exile. By now you should know a little bit more about me and where my passion for anime came from. If you've come to this video directly and missed my introduction video, then click here to check that one out. Just make sure you come back to watch this one later. So in the last video, I explained just how Millennium Exile came to be in the first place. You saw some of my very embarrassing artwork done by my younger self, and you learnt about my biggest inspirations. This video, however, is going to be a bit more about how I went from a simple sketch from a university assignment to where I'm at now, and just where I'm looking to take Millennium Exile in the future. I wanted people to see my characters. I wanted to share a part of my story with the world. But how? I mean, I'm a decent artist, and I can draw, but I'm not the best. Not by a long shot. I don't come from money. In fact, I'm an Australian photographer, so how the hell am I going to get anyone to notice me, let alone an animation studio in Japan? Well, you may not know this, but I'm a bit of an anime freak, in that I have an anime room filled with the stuff. As such, art books of some of my favourite titles were something that I enjoyed buying. So I decided that making an art book would be a good way to go. To create a professional presentation filled with artwork and information on all things Millennium Exile. I was always a massive fan of this art site on the internet called DeviantArt. It's a place for anything creative. Poetry, photography, stories and artwork. It's also got a fairly troll-free community, which is something really rare on the internet these days. Anyways, I was always watching these artists on DeviantArt, looking up to them and wondering to myself, wouldn't it be nice to see one of these artists draw my designs one day? Well, that turned out to be just the idea that I needed. I ended up reaching out to several artists from around the world on this site, asking them if they could draw my designs. I mean, it was a win-win. The artist gets paid, I get awesome artwork, the artist gets something new to draw, and I gain exposure. Unfortunately though, most artists were just flat out ignoring me, or if they did reply to me, the dollar price was just way more than I was able to afford. And then I met Harry on DeviantArt. Harry ended up drawing my first ever commission for me, a picture of Agato. I remember treasuring that art so much that I made a massive print of it and put it on my door. From there it was like an addiction. I started organising more of my characters to be drawn with him, and I started expanding my search for talented artists. I worked so hard to save money for each commission that I had drawn, and I spent a lot of money on the artwork, but I still actually felt like I was making a go of it. I was still busy designing new characters and writing like a madman for the art book, and more artists were now drawing for me on a commissioned basis. Time went by and I remember having a special artist draw for me as a one-time deal because they were running a special price for their commissions. They were live streaming the commission and I actually had the day off from work. So here I was, sitting in my chair, watching with my jaw open as this artist drew one of my characters. I'll never forget that moment because something very special happened during that live stream. There was a chat window open to the side where people watching could interact with the artist and with one another. Often the artist would just continue drawing while everyone else would talk to each other about what's going on screen. I remember at a particular point though, the artist was drawing the face of my character and just a casserole of questions erupted. Who is this? You know, with everyone trying to guess which anime this character is from. And then something unexpected happened. A random person from the crowd answered, "That's Zero from the Millennium Exile project," they said. I was stunned. Someone had actually recognized my character and proceeded to tell everyone else in the channel about my project. It was a good day because that one act brought in a lot of new fans and people who now watch Millennium Exile for more updates today. That actually brings me to my next point, exposure. While exposure is so very important to try and get noticed, it can be a two-edged sword for those trying to make something of themselves in the creative industry. Release too little and nobody will notice you. Release too much and you leave yourself vulnerable to people stealing your ideas. It's for that reason that I leave all the really original and juicy details about Millennium Exile off the internet. I mean, I'd love to share the whole thing with you guys. But I'm aiming for Millennium Exile to be an original anime, meaning that there's no real point for a studio to create an original title when the plot and all the things that make it original are already leaked to the internet. I want Millennium Exile to capture and entertain people, and as such, I really don't want to spoil too much for you. Idealistically, I would love Millennium Exile to be picked up one day from Studio Bones or Ufotable, or Ufotable, however you want to pronounce it. Bones was actually the very first anime studio I had in mind when creating Millennium Exile, mainly because the whole superhuman power genre really just seemed to be the very thing that they excelled at the most. But also, having seen the production quality coming out of Studio Ufotable, it's absolutely insane. I mean, who wouldn't want their project to be picked up by them? I mean absolutely no disrespect to any other animation studio out there. In fact, Gainax is the studio responsible for some of the greatest anime to date in my opinion, with others like Production IG and Madhouse having absolutely no shortage of amazing and successful titles of their own. It's just Bones and Ufotable are the two I personally feel would really hit the ground running with the kind of story that I've written. As time went on, I began to reach out to bigger and bigger names, not artists, but directors and other creative professionals seeking advice regarding the direction I was headed in. Luckily, I stumbled across a certain someone working in Los Angeles who had enough interest in what I was doing to want to invest some time to help and mentor me. Unfortunately, I can't mention his name because otherwise it just opens the floodgates for everyone out there wanting his advice, and then what would have started out as a very generous gesture of goodwill would suddenly turn into an email nightmare for him. What I can say, however, is that sometimes you just have to put yourself out there. 9 times out of 10, you'll probably get ignored and rejected. However, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. In my case, I was lucky to have such a seasoned pro helping me and offering me such invaluable advice. He suggested that I make a demo reel, seeing as how I already had such a considerable amount of artwork and many contacts with amazing artists. Anyways, Mr. Mentor, as I'll refer to him in this video, suggested that I open myself up to receiving donations. He explained that a studio might actually show more interest if they would see other people donating towards the Millennium Exile project instead of just me. And that makes sense. I mean, fair enough, I'm putting in my money, it's my project. But having other people separate with their hard-earned money to show support is a whole different thing. So I put the announcement out on Facebook, and to my surprise, I actually started receiving some amazing amount of money and support. Donations ranging from a few dollars to hundreds. I remember one donation in particular I received from a young boy of about 12 years of age. He lived on the other side of the world. With his donation, he stated that he was only young and didn't have much money. However, he wanted to donate whatever he could to show his support because he wanted to see Millennium Exile become an anime. He donated $10, and honestly, it meant so much to me that I actually teared up a little. So, on that topic of donations, I get asked a lot, why don't you use crowdfunding? I get this question all the time, and to be honest, it's because I really don't like them. That's not to say that I haven't tried. I had actually launched a Kickstarter and an Indiegogo campaign some time ago. The Kickstarter didn't go so well because of the way the page is set up and that you have to reach a goal to get your donations. Unfortunately, I think I set my goal a little higher than my reach was capable of at the time, and I fell short. Therefore, I received nothing. The Indiegogo, however, worked differently, in that you don't have to hit a certain mark to get the cash, and I got quite a few donations from that. However, it still didn't sit well with me that these sites were taking a percentage off the top of every donation because they were just hosting your campaign. I mean, it's not like these sites were actually going out of the way to advertise for you and trying to help you reach goals. Instead, I found that 100% of the donations I was receiving was actually just from me sharing the page out with family and friends and marketing myself. Also, with sites like Kickstarter, I've found that they only really work if you have the ability to make the product yourself, with money being the only component needed. Millennium Exile, however, is a different creature. It requires not only to animate it, but to animate it in a studio in Japan, a studio which would still need to greenlight the project. So you see, Millennium Exile's completion isn't just up to me. but it needs the approval of others in order to be made. Even the ability to privately fund the series would be an astronomical undertaking, as one 24-minute episode can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Recently, a privately funded anime called Under the Dog was in the news for its successful Kickstarter campaign, but the director was certainly not a nobody like I am, and it still had the support of Mentat Studios. So with all that aside, what is Millennium Exile actually about? Our story begins with a young orphaned man by the name of Vincent Klein. He lives in the dangerous, poverty-stricken place known as the Ryuga Ghettos. The ghettos themselves are a large lockdown perimeter tucked away behind the cliffs of Starfall Forest and the greed-fueled Ryuga metropolis. Having been born a Melee-meister, Vincent possesses superhuman physical abilities such as strength, stamina, and agility. He often found himself targeted by gang violence and alienated by the general public for his demonic capabilities. However, he would often spend his time trying to help the less fortunate, but still getting himself into trouble. It wasn't until one particular day that he met a strange man by the name of Zero, who confronted him about using his powers for a greater purpose. From there, Vincent was inducted into Grave, a clandestine organisation whose sole purpose is the eradication of a terrorist group known as Nexus. I really wish I could share more with you, however, again, this is the internet. Those who have donated have done so based off the designs and what they've read so far. There is actually a considerable amount of information about my characters online, and if I were to go over it all here in this video, it would just make the video way too long, not to mention my other sites would be redundant. So feel free to jump on over to my DeviantArt page and have a read. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with how much information is on there for you. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you've managed to sit through both videos, you have my gratitude. Millennium Exile really is my dream. I've actually been receiving a lot of fantastic support from people in the anime industry. Again, I can't really legally explain what it is or who these people are, but it really has been a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and one that I know most anime fans would kill for. Trust me, if Millennium Exile is getting made into an anime, you'll all be the first people to know. But until then, I hope you continue to watch me on Facebook and DeviantArt, and stay tuned. Hopefully you'll all be able to one day get the chance to watch the story that I've written unfold, and I hope you enjoy it. Take care.